Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Paris Schutz. Brandis Friedman has the night off. On the show tonight,
I don't plan to vote for Representative Madigan as Speaker of the House.
could new indictments in the ComEd scandal signal the end of the road for House Speaker Michael Madigan?
Help is on the way.
At least 2 vaccines may be ready soon. The next challenge, distribution, how a Chicago partnership is working to make it equitable. Mayor Lightfoot's budget proposal sails through a city council committee. What's next for the $12.8 billion plan? And Geoffrey Baer takes us behind the scenes of his new WTTW special premiering right after this show. It's called Chicago from the Air. But first, some of today's top stories. A massive new caseload of COVID-19 in the last 24 hours. State public health officials report 14,612 new cases with 168 additional deaths. The total caseload now is 621,383 with 11,178 total deaths. The 7-day testing positivity rate is ticked down just a notch to 14%. Meanwhile, public health officials announced that more than 6,000 patients are in the hospital across the state with COVID-19 right now, with nearly 1,200 in the ICU. The state's public health official, the top public health official, once again is urging residents not to travel or celebrate Thanksgiving with people that aren't in their immediate household because she says the consequences could be deadly.
I don't want anyone to have to look back and say, if only we didn't have people over for Thanksgiving, such and such, or so and so might still be here for New Year's or Christmas or Hanukkah or Kwanzaa.
Several protesters who say they were verbally and physically assaulted by Chicago police during summer protests have filed a federal lawsuit against the city. The lawsuit alleges that the city's response to the protests that broke out in the wake of the killing of George Floyd was, quote, violent and unconstitutional. Protesters are alleging that they were beaten and that CPD officers escalated the situation without being provoked.
This suit and this summer and this year has been a time of historical accountability, and this suit is the continuance of us documenting harm.
And the city's law department says it has not yet been served with the lawsuit, but will review the allegations thoroughly. A historic designation for Wrigley Field that also means some tax breaks for owners the Ricketts family. The National Register of Historic Places announced today that the famed ballpark has received designation as a National Historic Landmark. This comes 7 years after the Ricketts applied for that designation. It means the family can get some financial relief on the $1 billion project they undertook to renovate the 106-year-old building. The former CEO of Commonwealth Edison and several of the utility's top former lobbyists will face arraignment December 2nd. Their indictments are the latest break in an ongoing federal investigation into corruption in Illinois government. The Illinois House Speaker won't be among those in court, but he's still playing defense. Amanda Vinicky joins us now with the latest on this story. Amanda.
Well, Paris, as you noted, Madigan won't face arraignment. As he's readily pointed out, he has not been charged with doing anything illegal, but those close to him have. Former ComEd CEO Ann Premajor and former ComEd lobbyists Jay Doherty, Mike McLean, and John Hooker. McLean and Madigan have been friends since they started serving in the House together in the early 70s. The allegations from the U.S. Attorney's Office accuse McLean of using that proximity to ill effect. Wednesday's indictment accuses McLean of working with the ComEd team to conspire to steer contracts, jobs, and money to Madigan allies as an enticement and reward for the speaker's help passing rate hike laws that beefed up ComEd's bottom line. Madigan isn't named in the indictment, but he is repeatedly referenced as public official A. Prosecutors say in their private, though apparently wiretapped conversations, the alleged conspirators took pains to not say Madigan's name. According to the indictment, in order to conceal the nature and purpose of their conduct, conspirators often referred to public official A as our friend or a friend of ours, rather than using public official A's true name. And so far, these friends are sticking by Madigan. In statements provided by their attorneys, each of the 4 defendants say variations of the same theme, that the charges are untrue. McLean says the charges are the result of a misguided investigation and misapplication of the law, driven by an obvious desire to find some way to criminally implicate a current elected official who happens to be Mike McLean's longtime friend. But others are not sticking by Madigan. And while they may not be considered Madigan's friends, they are members of his Democratic Party, such as Representative Jonathan Carroll, who says Madigan will not be getting his vote as Illinois House Speaker. Carroll says it's nothing personal.
I think a lot of people, when they meet him, view him differently than what the media has portrayed him to be. So I've never experienced that. And again, and I've never been intimidated, nor have I ever been told how I need to vote, or have I none of that stuff. I mean, my interactions have been very positive. But that's really not, my relationship with him is not what my constituents care about. I think what my constituents care about is, it's time for a change. That the perceptions of him have creeped into our everyday life.
He says, criminal activity or not, Madigan has lost the people's trust. Carroll also hints Madigan isn't doing his job as Speaker. House Democrats haven't met at all, even virtually, since May.
We're a room of 74 elected officials that our districts felt are here for a reason. Let us get together and work.
It's not just him. In total, 16 elected representatives, Democrats that is, have publicly said they will not vote for Madigan as Speaker, which means Madigan does not have enough support to win another term. Come January, there will be 73 Democrats in the House, and whoever is Speaker needs 60 votes to win that job. With 16 opponents represented on the screen here by these open circles, Madigan can't clinch it. There is always a chance that someone could change their mind, but another Madigan defector, Representative Will Guzzardi, says don't count on it.
We've reached a critical mass, right? There are no longer enough votes for the speaker to get 60 votes and become the next speaker. So I think that it's time for us, as hard as this may be for people to believe, it's time for us to start asking the question about who is going to be the Speaker of the 102nd General Assembly and who can get to 60 votes, because that answer doesn't appear to be Michael J. Madigan.
That is a significant statement. Madigan has been Speaker of the Illinois House for all but 2 years, since 1983. Madigan, in a statement, says he did nothing wrong, and he said he's offended by the notion that he could be bribed. Governor J.B. Pritzker, weighing in, says he can't predict where the U.S. Attorney's investigation will lead, but that everyone is presumed innocent. But he says Madigan owes the public more than pat statements.
The pay-to-play quid pro quo situation outlined in these indictments released last night are unspeakably wrong. Anyone who concludes otherwise is insulting the public. If Speaker Madigan wants to continue in a position of enormous public trust with such a serious ethical cloud hanging over his head, then he has to, at the very least, be willing to stand in front of the press and the people and answer every last question to their satisfaction.
Republicans are quick to point out that the governor stopped short of calling for Madigan's resignation, as they have.
This is a problem for J.B. Pritzker and a problem for the House Democrat caucus, who have, as I said earlier, have stuck their head in the sand for years and decades because he controls them. He controls their elections. He controls their lives. And many of them don't have the backbone to be able to stand up to him.
In the statement his press team put out this morning, Madigan said nothing of his imperiled future as Speaker of the Illinois House. Paris, back to you.
All right, Amanda, we'll have to keep watching this. Thank you very much. And up next, thinking through how to make vaccine distribution equitable, so stick around.
Latinos, who make up 1/3 of the population, continue to power the city that works.
These are the people that are working 3 jobs, knowing that COVID is out there. Those are the people that need the help, and we should help them.
And as you know, the coronavirus is surging right now across the state and the country, but help is on the way, according to Dr. Anthony Fauci. 2 experimental vaccines appear to be extremely effective, he says, and the pharmaceutical companies are expected to seek emergency use authorization. Once a vaccine is available, the next challenge is distribution, and there's debate over who should get it first and how to make that distribution equitable. Here's President-elect Joe Biden on that subject today.
The brown, black, Asian American, Native American communities are always the first ones hit the hardest and the last ones who are brought back. We're going to flip that around. It's going to be really important to determine priorities.
And joining us to discuss what those priorities look like in Chicago are Rachel REICHLIN, Senior Program Officer and Public Health Nurse at Michael Reese Health Trust, Hugh Music, Associate Director of the Population Health Sciences Program at the University of Illinois at Chicago. He's also co-director of the Institute for Healthcare Delivery at UIC. And Miguel Blancarte Jr., member of the Health and Policy Committee of Illinois Unidos. He's a member of the Latinx COVID-19 Prevention Task Force and Director of Community Engagement and Partnerships at CORE, which is an organization that's facilitating COVID-19 testing. All right, welcome all of you. Miguel Blancarte, I want to start with you. You heard Vice President Joe Biden mention that the communities that have had been most impacted should be prioritized. How do you have an equitable vaccine distribution once a vaccine is ready to go?
Hi, Paris, and thank you very much for having us. The equitable distribution of a vaccine is definitely going to be necessary because there are populations that have consistently been left at the peripheries with various social detriments of health, that they are individuals from communities that have high positivity rates, right? Some of these communities have high positivity rates such as 30%. And we really need to ensure that they are being provided with access to this vaccine because they are susceptible not only to picking up the virus itself, but also really to disseminating it to other community members and the rest of the city.
And you three are all part of an effort to do just that. 35 organizations involved in this effort to distribute this vaccine equitably. Rachel, tell us what this partnership is tasked with doing.
So Michael Reese is a public foundation that leverages its resources to incubate, strengthen, and advocate for solutions that ensure all Chicagoans can live healthy lives. And this coalition is an effort where we're working closely with Hope Brothers Foundations and leveraging our relationships with other philanthropic partners to make sure that critical community stakeholders are helping to co-design this plan. So we are bringing community members to the table, and the group collectively is building up a workforce that can help educate, disseminate, and help the community navigate to the critical vaccines.
And Hugh Music, if you heard the Vice President today and the President-elect, I mean, they seem to be consensus that healthcare workers are going to get the first crack once the vaccine's available. And then what happens? After that, should it go exclusively to the most vulnerable populations here, the ones that live closest together, the ones that have seen the highest testing rates?
So, Paris, the National Academy of Medicine has a framework for the equitable distribution of the COVID-19 vaccine. And so, as you indicated, it does begin with healthcare workers and first responders. And that is phase 1A. Phase 1B actually includes people with comorbidities with serious risk of getting very sick from this, as well as older people living in congregate settings. After that, what you have is outreach then to K-12 teachers and staff, frontline workers whose roles are very important for society. So that might include, people who work in public transportation. Then you have people with moderate risk with comorbidities, which is a significant part of populations. And in particular, you see higher rates of comorbidities among some of these communities that have been hardest hit And that's why we're actually seeing higher rates of hospitalization and actual higher mortality is because there is this correlation between poverty and higher incidence of hypertension, higher incidence of diabetes, and other sorts of chronic
We've
conditions.
certainly seen that play out all throughout the pandemic. Miguel Blancarte, you mentioned outreach. You know, in the African American community and probably also in the Hispanic Latino community, there is a little distrust about vaccines, just given history here. So how does that play into the distribution of the vaccine?
Well, that's really important, and I think that's why, right, having the community component to this partnership with the vaccine court that we established, because it's community, but it's also health institutions and public-private partnerships. So in order for us to really get folks on board, Black, Brown, and underserved individuals to really uptake the vaccine itself and be willing to take it, we want community members, community leaders, and that's partly, for example, Illinois Unidos serving as trusted leaders that community members feel comfortable with. So if the information from this task force goes down to the community members, right, that's one positive, but it's also about trickling that information from the community itself up to this task force to really inform how the distribution should look and what are some of these concerns that we should that we should alleviate.
Hey, Rachel, let's talk about like the size and scope of mobilization here to get this out to everybody in Chicago. Who's going to be doing it? How many people need to do it? Where's it going to be happening?
The actual plan of dissemination is held at the health department, so at the city, state, and county level. So, but we are working very closely with those health departments on this partnership. We are working to align with our public partners to mobilize resources quickly and strategically so that what we catalyze today becomes more equitable and effective infrastructure for tomorrow. So in terms of actually how the logistics of moving the vaccine, that's one piece of the challenge. And the other piece is the mobilization of the community, as Miguel alluded to. And so that's going to have to happen very closely together.
And Hugh Music, what kind of time frame are we looking at? You mentioned the different phases. How long will that take?
Well, so all of this is contingent upon when vaccines become available. I think the most important thing, though, is to begin to prime communities, and we believe we need to move right now, and we need to find trusted community partners like Illinois Unidos and other community-based organizations and faith-based organizations to start the conversation with community members and understand what their hesitancy is. So this should be going on right now with the hope that vaccines will become available sometime in the spring and in the summer. And those
all right, Hugh, I'm sorry, we have to leave it there. But you know, message received. It's time to start mobilizing. And I want to thank all of you for being here. Rachel REICHLIN, Hugh Music, and Miguel Blancarte Jr.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Lightfoot's 2021 budget is just one step away from passing. This after the plan cleared a final committee vote earlier today. WTTW News reporter Heather Sharon has been following the budget saga, and she joins us now with the latest. All right, Heather, the 2021 budget survived the Finance Committee, survived the Budget Committee vote. What now?
Well, now it heads to a vote by the full city council, and there are usually 2 full votes by the city council. So the first one will happen on Monday, and if there are going to be fireworks, that's when we'll see it, and it will give us a better sense of how many aldermen will vote no. Last year, 11 did. It could be double that this year because of the huge property tax hike, gas tax hike, and massive restructuring of the city's debt.
And back in the BC days before COVID, there was always sort of deferring the budget to another meeting when everyone met in person. I do long for those days, going to city council and watching all that. It's a lot of fun. All right, so remind us what this budget hopes to accomplish and how.
Well, it has to close a $1.2 billion shortfall in 2021, not to mention a $799 million shortfall in 2020. So this is the pandemic budget, and it does that as I said, with a variety of tax hikes, debt restructuring, and fee increases. So people will definitely feel it January 1st, assuming this budget passes.
And if it does pass, what can the average taxpayer expect?
Well, if you own a home in Chicago worth about $250,000, the tax hike is going to mean about $56 a year. But the city isn't the only government agency that levies property tax, right? The schools do, the city colleges districts do. So probably you're looking at about $112 more in property taxes at a minimum. And if you own a home that's worth more, you will pay more, which is why a lot of aldermen from wealthy wards, including downtown and the north side, are expected to vote no, and in fact have already voted no, setting up a relatively close vote, at least in terms of Chicago budgets, which usually passed under mayors Daley and Emanuel with 0 or single-digit no votes.
It's a tough pathway to 26 votes, but so far, when you pass those committee votes, it's usually a good sign that it's going to pass to the full city council. At least that's what we've seen in the past, but I think everything's on the table in 2021 or 2020. All right, thank you, Heather.
Thanks, Paris.
And make sure to read Heather's full story on our website. That's at WTTW.com/news. And up next, what we can learn about Chicago from the air. But first, we take a look at the weather.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part through the generous support of the Julius Frankel Foundation.
It's a bird, it's a plane, it's Geoffrey Baer in his new special, Chicago from the Air, airing in just a few minutes right here on WTTW. Geoffrey shows us Chicago as we've never quite seen it before. Let's take a look.
We humans spend most of our lives at ground level. But what if we could soar like birds? We'd see our familiar surroundings in entirely new ways. We'd have aha moments discovering how places we know relate to each other, and just marvel at the beauty. Yes, we get brief glimpses of this from airplane windows and limited perspectives from skyscrapers. But what if we really were free to soar anywhere, at any altitude? Well, let's give it a try. I'm Geoffrey Baer. Spread your wings as we explore Chicago from the air.
And joining us now with more is the one and only Geoffrey Baer. Hey, Geoffrey, how's it going?
Oh, I'm Super Geoffrey, according to your introduction there.
Super. All right, Geoffrey, so you've explored Chicago by foot, by by bike. What drew you to the bird's eye view?
Well, you know, we were thinking about what can we do in this age of the pandemic, and shooting from 400 feet in the air is kind of the ultimate in social distancing, isn't it? But, you know, as it turned out, when I saw more and more of this footage, I realized this is a whole different way to tell stories. And man, we should have probably done this years ago.
And you capture all these incredible shots just in that promo there. Tell me how you pulled this off technically.
Well, we use a drone. We don't use a helicopter. So a drone, you know, is a small remote controlled device. The camera person and the pilot are on the ground with remote control devices. You have to follow a lot of FAA rules. It is not a toy. We worked with a great, really the premier drone photography company in Chicago, Flying Badger. It got a lot of permissions that had to be secured for flyovers, especially in restricted areas like downtown. But the best thing for me was that, unlike a helicopter, a drone can do these sort of daredevil moves, really like a bird. So you can fly through tree branches and circle around ornamental details on the tops of buildings. And we really tried to use the drone to best advantage in that way.
I'm sure you don't want it to be in the path of a runway at O'Hare or Midway. So you've explored every crevasse of this city, Geoffrey. I don't think there's anything left to explore. Is there anything that gave you a new perspective by viewing it this way?
Oh, for sure. The thing that I think what's my favorite thing about this program is the second chapter. The first chapter is about the street grid. The second chapter is about industry in Chicago. And the third chapter is about natural and man-made beauty. But that second chapter about industry, you know, seeing all these sprawling industrial sites from the air, it's sort of mesmerizing. They're sort of oddly beautiful, like the wastewater treatment plant down on the Sanitary and Ship Canal in Stickney. Was filmed on this day with this beautiful blue sky and puffy white clouds. So this mosaic of circular pools kind of reflect the sky. It's sort of amazing to see. And of course, it's not smell-o-vision, so you know, that was an advantage. There's a solar farm down in Pullman with the light kind of glinting off this huge expanse of solar panels. And then my favorite thing, Thornton Quarry down in the south suburbs, which is kind of like the Grand Canyon. I thought, let's dive off the cliff and down into Thornton Quarry. And we were able to do that with the drone.
All right, new perspectives to be sure. And again, stick around to catch the premiere of Chicago from the Air here on WTTW right after our program or on our website, WTTW.com/air. But for now, my thanks to Geoffrey Baer.
My pleasure.
And that is our show for this Thursday night, abbreviated to bring you, as we just mentioned, the premiere of Chicago from the Air. Please join us tomorrow night at 7 for the Week in Review. And now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy, stay safe, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, representing dozens of families in the crash of a Boeing 737 MAX 8 jet. Mr. Clifford has been named lead counsel in litigation in federal court in Chicago.